There's a moment in your life when you look in the mirror and realize you're carrying a weight you never agreed to hold, a heaviness you didn't choose, a story that didn't start with you, but somehow became your responsibility to finish. And maybe you've never spoken it out loud, but deep down you know the truth. The person you became, or the person you're terrified of becoming, is tied to the man who raised you, or perhaps the man who didn't. This isn't just about childhood memories, it's about the invisible architecture of your soul. Why do you struggle with things that seem so simple for others? Why do you feel so weak in moments that demand your strength? The answer isn't a defect in your character, it's an inheritance. It's a psychological legacy that was passed down like a piece of property. Except instead of land or money, you were given a collection of shadows and a map that only leads to dead ends. A father does not just raise a child, he raises their inner voice. That narrator in your head, the one you hear when you doubt yourself, when you're trying to impress a room, or when you're paralyzed by the fear of your next step, that isn't naturally yours. For some, that voice is a wind at their back, a steady drumbeat of "you belong here." But for you, maybe it became a voice that makes you shrink instead of rise, a voice that repeats old patterns you inherited before you were even old enough to understand them. You ask yourself, why do I crumble under pressure? Why do I avoid the very things that could make my life better? It's not because you're weak by nature. It's because you were trained to breathe in a world built by someone else's fears. This training didn't happen in a classroom. It happened in the quiet moments between dinner and bedtime, in the way a door slammed or the way a question was ignored. You learned the geography of his moods before you learned the geography of the world, and that map is still tucked away in your subconscious, guiding your every move today.
Think about how a child learns what strength is. They don't read it in a book, they watch. They watch how a father responds to a crisis, how he handles a mistake, and whether he treats emotions as something to express or something to bury alive. If your father raised you with silence, you learned that your own voice was a liability. You learned that being quiet was the only way to be good. If he raised you with anger, you became a master at walking on emotional eggshells, hyper-aware of shifts in the air that no one else even notices. You became an intuitive genius, but for all the wrong reasons. You developed the ability to read the room, not to lead it, but to survive it. If he demanded perfection, you didn't develop ambition. You developed a high-functioning anxiety that wears ambition as a mask. You aren't working hard because you love the goal. You're working hard because you're terrified of the consequences of being average. None of this makes him a monster. It makes him a human who was likely survival moding his way through life. He could only give you the tools he had in his own toolbox, even if those tools were broken, rusted, or designed to hurt.
That state of constant hypervigilance, that's not a personality trait, it's neuroscience. When you grow up learning how to read a father's moods instead of understanding your own, your brain hardwires itself for survival. Studies show that environments shaped by unpredictability or emotional distance physically alter your stress pathways. Your amygdala, the part of the brain that scans for threats, became oversized, while your ability to feel safe in your own skin was stunted. You aren't stuck today because you lack potential. You're stuck because your nervous system was trained to anticipate danger instead of possibility. You learned to hide your true self because, once upon a time, being seen felt unsafe. To be noticed was to be judged. To be heard was to be silenced. That's not weakness. That's a brilliant adaptation by a child who just wanted to be okay. But the tragedy of the human condition is that the survival strategies of the child become the prison bars of the man. But here is where adulthood gets complicated. The very armor that protected you in the past becomes the cage that limits you today. You learned emotional freezing as a child to stay out of the line of fire, and now at 30 or 40, you call it indecision. You call it procrastination, but it's actually your body trying to protect you from a threat that died decades ago. You learned to avoid conflict to keep the peace, and now you call it being easygoing. But you aren't easygoing, You're just terrified of being the reason someone else is upset. You learned to depend on no one because no one was dependable, and now you call that strength or hyper-independence. But is it strength, or is it just a well-maintained wall? Real strength includes the ability to be vulnerable, to need others, and to be seen in your mess. Your relationship with your father became the blueprint for how you relate to yourself. If he never expressed pride, you don't work for fulfillment. You perform for validation, chasing a ghost that will never tell you enough. You are running a race toward a finish line that he keeps moving in your mind.
You have to realize that people underestimate how deeply a father's energy imprints itself. It's not about the lectures he gave, it's about his presence or his absence. A father's absence is often louder than his voice ever could have been. It creates a hole in the shape of a man that you spend your whole life trying to fill with achievements, women, money, or distractions. It's about what he did when life became difficult and the parts of himself he never dared to heal. A father unconsciously teaches you what to fear and what manhood or strength looks like. If he struggled with his own inner demons, he might have passed them to you like a heavy heirloom, an antique of trauma that you didn't ask for but are expected to polish. You grew up believing that emotional restraint is maturity, that never needing help is independence, and that exhaustion is just the price of being responsible. But look at how much of that has collapsed under you. Look at how tired you are from fighting internal battles that no one else can see. You are carrying his unhealed wounds on top of your own, and no wonder you feel like you're drowning. You replay conversations for hours, wondering if you said the right thing, because as a child, the wrong word could change the atmosphere of the house for days. You feel a wave of guilt the moment you try to rest, because in his eyes, rest was laziness and vulnerability was a flaw.
You feel physically uncomfortable when someone offers you genuine praise, because you weren't wired to receive love, you were wired to earn it. This isn't a lack of character, it's emotional conditioning. It is the result of thousands of micro-interactions where your worth was tied to your performance. Healing begins when you stop looking at these habits as who you are and start seeing them as what you learned. When people tell you to just be confident, they don't understand that you were raised in a house where confidence felt like a threat to the equilibrium. They don't understand that for you, standing tall feels like putting a target on your back. But here's the truth. You can outgrow that blueprint. You are the architect now. Just because you inherited his limitations doesn't mean they are your destiny. The moment you even question these patterns, the moment you say, wait, this isn't me, this is him, that is the birth of a strength your father may never have been brave enough to find. To truly rebuild, you have to face the most difficult transition of all, seeing your father not as an immovable figure of authority, but as a person who likely survived rather than thrived, a person who was once a little boy himself, perhaps raised by a man even colder, even harsher, or even more absent than he was.
When you look at him through the lens of generational trauma, you see a chain of men who are all taught to starve their hearts to feed their pride. Understanding this doesn't excuse the gaps he left, but it explains them. It takes the personal out of the pain. He didn't withhold love because you weren't lovable. He withheld it because he didn't have any in his own reservoir to give. And when you understand the origin, you stop feeling defective and start feeling aware. Awareness is the only real form of freedom. It's the moment you realize that your inner critic isn't your own voice. It's just an echo from someone who never learned how to be kind to themselves. Breaking these rules will feel like betrayal. It will feel like you are leaving him behind. Your mind will tell you that staying small is staying safe, and that staying wounded is staying loyal to the family story. But you are not that child anymore, and the threats you once prepared for no longer exist. The monster in the hallway has been gone for years, yet you are still holding your breath. You are allowed to let that breath out. You are allowed to build your own definition of strength, one rooted in honesty rather than silence, and compassion rather than perfection.
You aren't rejecting your father by becoming more. You are honoring the part of him that wanted more but didn't know how to reach for it. You are the one who finally breaks the cycle. You are the one who looks at the heavy heirloom and decides it doesn't belong in your home. This journey of deconstructing the father voice is the hardest work you will ever do. It requires you to sit with the discomfort of being new. It requires you to forgive yourself for the years you spent living as a shadow of someone else's expectations. But on the other side of that work is a version of you that is unfiltered, unburdened, and unafraid. You are responsible for what you choose to carry forward into the next generation. Will you pass down the same silence, the same walls, or will you pass down the story of a man who looked at his inheritance and decided to trade it for something better? The story doesn't end with the patterns you inherited. It begins with the strength you are discovering right now. You were never weak because of your father. You only believed you were because that was the only world you were shown. But the world is much bigger than his shadow, and today you are finally stepping into the light. The weight you've been carrying, you can put it down now. It was never yours to carry, and you have nothing left to prove to the ghosts of your past. You are here, you are enough, and for the first time in your life, you are finally free to be exactly who you are.